My name is Angel, and today I want to just put this, the word shiny objects in context for you. So as developers, right, and technical people, we run into really hard problems sometimes, and when we run into those hard problems, we get desperate, right? We need to create something new or fix something, and sometimes, a lot of times, we don't know how to do it, quite how to do that, right? And then we start in our desperate search for solutions. Maybe someone else has solved this. Maybe there's a product that I can buy or purchase, or you know, an open source project that I could use to solve this problem. And then we implement these things without having full knowledge of how they work, right? I've been there many times. I'm sure I'll still, as much as I would like to believe I wouldn't follow that same pattern, I'm sure I will in the future. And again, I just wanted to put this talk into kind of context. So my name is Angel Rivera. I work at a company called Circle CI. How many people in the room know of Circle CI? All right, a few. That's awesome. Yeah, and we're a continuous integration, continuous delivery platform for developers, and we enable you to build, test, and deploy your code using automation. So I'm a developer advocate, and what I do is I basically go out and speak to developers and technical folks at events, and I'm there just basically to learn about what's going on in the industry and also to advise folks, right, with my experience. So it's a, you know, learning and intelligence or data gathering kind of job where I go and, you know, share information. I bring back information, not necessarily all about Circle CI and how our customers are using us, but just in general about technology. I bring it back to the teams at Circle and share that with them so that we can build better products that are useful for our users. I started my career off as a I started my career off in the United States Air Force. I was working for United States Air Force Space Command. And there I was working primarily at Cape Canaveral Air Station in the space program when we were launching shuttles back in the day. And there I began my professional coding or programming career. And back then, when I was writing code, we didn't really have that concept of DevOps, right? There was always this, I guess, barrier or separation, right, where we were developers and then there was operations or system administrators. So we would write the code, package it up, and then throw it over the wall or put it on a network share or on a CD and walk it down to some office, and that was the last I saw of my code. But I was always curious, you know, as a developer, I didn't believe in that. I was like, no, I wrote this code, and the only time I hear about it is when they have problems installing it or, you know, running it. And then I hear from it's usually a confrontational experience where they come and say, hey, your code's broke, fix it, and they walk off, right? No details. How many people here has that happened to, or does that happen to? Well, all right, I'm sure there's more. But for the most part, it was unacceptable because I cared about what I was doing, and I actually wanted to learn about, you know, all right, I wrote this stuff, I put a lot of time into it, I want to see how it's deployed and how, you know, how it's running and where it's running. I didn't even know what was happening with it after I wrote this stuff. So eventually, right, I was a developer with operational tendencies. I went down and I started, you know, hanging out with the ops teams, and in the beginning they were very apprehensive, like, this is unheard of. Why is this developer guy down here? Is he spying on us and going back to the managers and telling them, like, you know, these guys don't know what they're doing? But in the end, they realized that I was just there because I was super curious, and they started, you know, showing me the dark arts of ops, right? Letting me in on their little secrets and stuff. And actually, it was pretty cool. I learned a lot, and eventually, I started, you know, moving on to different jobs and such. And ever since the initial learnings that I achieved there at the initial organization, for some reason, every time I, you know, worked, I was hired as a software engineer or developer, and eventually, like 3 months later, I'd be working as a software developer, but with the ops teams because I was great at liaising between developers and operations. So I was doing DevOps like, way back in the 90s before it was all DevOps. And I really enjoy it. So I'm glad to see like this is becoming a thing, right? And I saw the value in it back then, and I still see the value in it today. So today I'm going to tell you a little story about a situation or about a time when I was working with a team. And I'm going to share my little shiny object moment, right? So I was working with a team years ago and in an organization, and basically the team, we were actually doing DevOps, right? We were really cohesive team as developers and operators. Really good relationships. Everyone trusted one another, and we had a good culture there. So we had some really talented folks on both sides of the house, and it was an awesome team. So our management came and asked us to build out some new web UI features that our customers were asking for quite some time, and they were prepared. The product team was ready to start, this project to build out this new web feature. Now, how many web developers are in the room? A quick show of hands. All right, we've got a few. So back in the day, and I think it's still present today, we were using a relational data model for the persistence layer of this the monolith application that we're building these features for. But some of the capabilities that were being requested, we needed to engage new or implement with new web frameworks that really didn't fit our legacy persistent data model or relational data model. So we were running into really huge challenges trying to use these new frameworks and make it work and integrate it with our older data layer, right, and our older data models. So the specific problem that we had was, again, we had a relational model, and then these new frameworks were all basically hierarchical data models, right? So they had nodes, and if you don't know the difference between relational and like a hierarchical data model, it's like a 2D versus 3D, right, in a sense. So it's really hard to take this flat structure and then make it a robust data structure. So we were super frustrated. We were like at our wits' end. We had a few solutions, but they were very non-performant, right? And it just was really hacky, the stuff we were coming up with, and we were not comfortable with it at all. But then I was working with a product on my own personal projects, and I was using MongoDB, right? I wasn't an expert at all, but I was kicking the tires on it, and it really, the light bulb went off for me. It was like, wow, this is the platform that would really help us implement what we need to do, right? So basically what we're doing is taking this robust hierarchical data model, and MongoDB stores it and it persists in that that same format. There's no processing that needs to happen. I don't have to transform any data, right? It was literally perfect. So I started doing some MVPs with the new requirements that we had, and I started showing it off to the team. And they were super happy. Everyone was just like relieved because we were desperate, right? We needed to get this done, and we were having a hard time finding solutions for this. So once the teams started building out POCs with it, we started, again, kicking the tires. The ops teams were on board. We kind of came to them and said, hey, look, this is what we want to do. They were on board. They were ready to support us. And we were talking about installing or in deploying a new MongoDB infrastructure, which is not a small feat at all, but it's not that difficult either. The only issue was that no one on the team except for myself, and I wasn't that experienced, had MongoDB experience, right? So I became kind of the de facto MongoDB expert within the team. And I gladly took that role on, worked with the ops teams, and we built out or designed the cluster and the infrastructure. And it was actually a pretty smooth process from that point. the web team started building out, or developers started building out the product, and they actually, once we had the data problem solved, we made really quick work of the actual code, right, the application, the features. And they were able to package that up and have a production-ready release within weeks. It took them no time to put that up. It took us a little longer to stand up the infrastructure for, the MongoDB to support that feature. But once everything was in place, we deployed the project. Pretty much everybody was happy, right? Management was like super ecstatic about us being able to, complete our project, get it deployed to our customers. And we were actually, we finished early, right? This very unusual for us, but we finished early with this project. And we were just like, wow, this is great. But there was a reason for that. Excuse me. So again, we deployed the application. Our customers just latched onto it right away, started using it. And they were super happy, right? We're getting lots of props, right? Everybody's just enjoying the product. Life was good all the way around. Everybody was happy. Until bump, right? 90 days later, boom, right? MongoDB starts throwing up alerts from the cluster, high disk I/O thrashing, memory's just through the roof, and the CPU's pegged. So, of course, we knew right away there was a problem, but then it started trickling down to our users, and we started getting reports of, performance is terrible. The app was timing out, failures all over the place. People were not happy. So as, good teams do, we jump into troubleshooting mode. We start peeling back the onions. And again, we had a really stellar team, so our troubleshooting skills were just on point. We figured out exactly what was going on because we had all the telemetry and the data that we needed to start debugging. What had happened was the features were so popular that our users were using the system, and we accrued about 15 million plus records, which for a database, that's nothing, right? And we were like, why is this happening? This is MongoDB. Databases are built for this. And of course, excuse me, we again peeled back the onion a little more, and we figured out, right, we had some pretty bad queries written, and the indexing was terrible, right? We were indexing on the wrong fields and the wrong values. So that was a problem. We actually also, I don't know if you know this, but the MongoDB they reference it as NoSQL or non-relational, which means, I don't know if you're familiar with relational, but when you have a relational data structure, basically you can, it's designed to reduce the amount of data in your database, right? So, and also gives you kind of a source of truth. So you can link, if you have a value in one table, you can link to another and make sure that there's some integrity there. With non-relational, there's no such thing, right? Literally, it's designed to be, it's kind of a standalone data structure and data persistence. So what we did was, just because we're in that mentality, and everyone's, who uses databases was thinking, all right, we need to build a relationship within this non-relational thing. We did that, and it was a hack, again, right? It was not intended for that. And that just is a result of a poorly structured and poor schema decisions that we made. So it was a total disaster. And in order for us to get the system back and running quickly, we decided to triage this thing. And the quickest thing to get us back up and running at the fastest possible time was to basically remove. It's just simple math. We removed or transplanted half of the 15 million records into a different collection that weren't being used. So this was like most of the data, as most data is, it's the older data, no one really accesses it that much, right? So this application, luckily, it was just about the real-time data, like the most recent data. So we were able to move that over temporarily to get the system back up and running, recover the system, and then go ahead and make the appropriate changes to the schema, the structure, right? All the stuff we need to do, a permanent fix, and then patch it. And then we were off and running again, and with some lessons learned. But the damage had been done, right? Our customers had a bad experience. Management was super pissed because they lost some money, and so did our customers for that matter, which was, totally right. And we were really down on ourselves as a team because we lost our street cred, right? Like, we thought we were the baddest of the baddest, and I mean that in a good sense. But it hurt us. It really did. And, luckily, we had some professionals, of course, and we performed a hotwash or a post-mortem to figure out why, right? We understand the technology reasons why, but, why within our culture or our team did this happen? So peeling back the onion, of course, right, the technical mistakes that we made, obviously, right, the bad schema, some programming was inefficient, and we realized that we just didn't follow our protocols, meaning SOPs and such. We also didn't test our system the way we normally did, right? And we would have discovered all of this had we done testing with, on the load balance and performance testing, which was like always required. But again, we were so desperate and so happy that we found a solution and so confident amongst ourselves and our experience that we just totally just ignored all of the things that we normally would ding each other for, right? And the other reason that we figured out, sorry about this, right, okay, sorry. So the other reason was we didn't properly vet Mongo. Again, we were so desperate to find a solution that we just, as soon as we got one working, we just said, all right, this is working right now. Let's implement this. And no one really thought about going back and saying, all right, we have to kind of get a subject matter expert or a DBA of some sort, right, to manage the system. They all relied on me and another person that was working with me on the project, so we were kind of the de facto DBAs for this thing. But we didn't really understand the capabilities, and actually what we really didn't understand was the NoSQL paradigm, right? The whole concept behind this. We just figured, oh, we'll just bring over our non-relational stuff and we'll brute force and make Mongo do what we need it to do, which is not the way it should have been done. So this was a good example of a shiny object, right? And Mongo wasn't the problem per se, right? It wasn't their fault. It was our fault because we didn't know what we had there, what we were using. And we just read some of that marketing fluff, right? And it gives you the, hey, you can do all these things. But they really don't. If you dig deep, right, you really don't understand what's going on until you actually go into the manuals and actually read maybe some white papers, right? That would have been nice. But basically, next I want to just go over some of the things and give you some advice about how to avoid this, right, in the future for yourselves. So one of the things, of course, first thing off is don't believe the hype. Don't believe the marketing hype. Don't believe the product hype. And also, don't believe your own team's hype, right? So again, we were a pretty solid team. We all knew that we're pretty good at what we do, and we were confident within ourselves, and our culture was kind of that we all trusted that the other guy was going, or the other person was going to do what needed to be done. And I think that's where we were out of whack, right? We didn't really, I would say, keep each other in check, right, at that point. We didn't keep each other honest because we were all too busy and desperate trying to get this thing up and running. The other thing is, obviously, right, thoroughly vet the technologies that you're planning on implementing. Understand and learn the level of effort that it requires to implement that stuff, and also learn its capabilities and limitations, right, within the context of your solution, because not all situations will fit, right? And it may be great for a specific situation, but then that solution could be detrimental to another, right? It could cause more damage than good. So definitely have a thorough understanding of what's going on with this new technology and educate yourself on what it is. A lot of times I like to go and, there's always like YouTube or something online, webinars. The best way to go is just go to a meetup, even a hackathon, right? Because sometimes the vendors will come and say, hey, kick the tires on our stuff. They want you to go there. And that's a good way to kind of hit the ground running, use the technology, and then also you have the experts there to ask questions, right? It's another way to do that. So another thing you can do to avoid the shiny object syndrome is that don't break your protocols, right? Stick with your SOPs. They're a pain in the ass, but they're there for a reason, right? They serve a purpose. And also review these SOPs, because what's good for you today and what works for you today is not going to be, right, probably viable for you tomorrow. Because as technology changes, our procedures should be changing as well. And a good example of this is like back in the day when you were deploying an application, a lot of it was done manually, right? Now today, it's pretty much automated, scripted. So, if you had an SOP on how to do something manually, now your SOP should reflect how you do it today. If you don't have SOPs, which is kind of standard with startups, I find, make some. They're a great way to document how your teams perform and how your teams basically stand things up, infrastructure. Also, it provides continuity, right? So if people leave, you have a nice way to transfer knowledge and information. And it also makes it a little easier on your teams to have, everyone's kind of standardized, right, on the way to operate within your infrastructure and within your teams. And yeah, make sure that you modify them, again, review them, modify them when they don't work for you anymore. Avoid this, right? This actually bit us too. Like I said, I was the expert, me and another person. And we said it, and our ops team was, luckily they set things up so that there's monitoring and stuff, and we caught the alerts early, but I didn't touch it. I assumed the other folks were going to be maintaining this thing, and they weren't really. And that's where we ended up, where we were in that situation. So, yeah, we declared mission accomplished, but at the end of the day, it really wasn't. The mindset was just like, oh, it's there, it's done. And we were like, whew, we produced the product. So, a point here is technology, for me, in my opinion, technology is really all about people, right? It's supposed to make our lives fun, comfortable, and easy. And when you have people involved, that forms culture. And when you have culture, those things, culture sets values, attitudes, and goals. Now, I want to talk about people in general. I'm from New Jersey, so I had to make a Jersey reference, right? Anybody run their teams like this guy up here? No? I know there's probably one of you out there. I used to, but, HR got on me, so. But let's talk about managers a little bit, right? And give you some advice if you're a manager. At least some of the things that I've implemented in my career that have helped me, I see a big difference. So I manage my teams in a style that I call sudo management. I don't know if you know what sudo is, but basically, when you're on a Unix box or a Linux box, if you need special privileges, you preface all of your commands with a sudo, and it gives you a little bit of extra power, right, over the system. So I like sudo management style because I basically tell my teams, hey, I am a colleague, I am a peer, we all work together until I need to do managerial type tasks, right? Till I need to maybe work on a budget or take care of maybe some conflict resolution, whatever it is I need to do as a manager, then I will sudo up, do those things, and exit gracefully, right? And this is really useful, or I found that it's very useful because it knocks down the intimidation barrier, right? So folks are not like, oh, Angel's the manager, I can't argue with him, or I can't, provide feedback. It builds a mutual respect between leadership and individuals. That's what I've experienced with using this type of management style. So, and it's from the military, right? It's lead by example for the most part. But at the end of the day, you definitely want people to not be intimidated and be able to, because I'm sure you've worked with some individuals, or maybe if you're a manager, and your team's not giving you all of their feedback, right? They're holding back, and that's what I'm trying to eliminate with this. Empower your people. Make sure you give them the authority, or at least give them the belief that they have the authority to make decisions. It just inspires ownership and helps them actually start developing their leadership style as well. That's what I found in my experience. I've seen this on a slide earlier. I think the gentleman 2 talks before, the first talk. Yeah, embrace your failures. Limit the blame game. Don't sit there and have these postmortems and try to figure out who did what, right? Figure out what went wrong first, and then kind of start at that high level. And everyone, because we all know, right, who's kind of responsible for what. But at the end of the day, a lot of times the problems that occur and failures that happen are a combination of things. So we need to understand what happened, and then eventually it'll trickle down and cascade into the individuals. And then sometimes it's, training. I've seen where people are just making assumptions and they're not well trained. And at the end of the day, it's like the whole team's fault, not just one person, right? So that tells me as a manager, I need to provide some training to my folks, right? And again, it could be an SOP that's just outdated, These things happen. So definitely embrace your failures. It's not a bad thing. I believe, like at Circle CI, we just had an outage for like 2 days, and our customers were super pissed. But the company, I really admire them because they're really transparent about what's happening, And actually, guess what database system caused the problem? Take a guess, anybody? There you go. So, right, but we're working very transparently, and I think that's another thing to mention here is be transparent, right? Don't be afraid to be transparent. Of course, there's limitations within organizations, but amongst your teams, you should be fully transparent. Mentor, right? Instill a learning kind of environment, and learning and teaching, actually. Knock down all those barriers that make people, intimidated to kind of ask questions, and actually, if you're a manager, yeah, just be there for your people and give them as much resources as you can, meaning your time, or get them the training that they need. It's super critical to grow a really cool and productive culture. As managers, sometimes we struggle with this. I do all the time, is making those hard choices, right? You can't sustain untenable situations, right? You got to have those difficult conversations when you encounter them. And also, it just shows the team that you are a leader and you're actually not afraid to make the choice, even if they're wrong, right? You won't know until you actually make the choice. But I find that this is one of the stumbling blocks for like building nice cultures or great cultures within a team. Let's talk about us as individuals. This will be a little bit fun. So, right. I have to make an office reference, sorry. So we all influence our cultures, right, on the teams. Excuse me. And we should strive to lead regardless of titles. So I would recommend as individuals that you just start taking ownership. There's always things in projects and on teams that people don't want to do. I'm just a glutton for punishment. I always go for like the crappiest jobs nobody wants to do when I join a new team because I just like to challenge myself that way. But it also shows, a commitment to learning and, basically being a team player in a sense that, when people come on board, they'll give you the crap job they don't want to do. But I embrace that, right? That's just my style. But I like to take ownership and help my team, build that kind of culture, pick up the reins and just drive decisions. So we're all capable of doing that. And if you get in trouble for that, then maybe you should rethink being where you are, if you can, because that's not a good culture. It's not good leadership. Yeah, this is really annoying. So if you're a developer or an operator and you see something wrong, instead of pointing it out to people and not offering any kind of solution, just go ahead and fix it. Just the other day, I saw a mistake in some documentation. It was in GitHub. I just corrected it, right? I made a branch. I corrected it. I committed it, pushed it up, made a PR, and everyone was socializing around this new pull request that I made, a patch that I made to the documentation, and it started a nice conversation. And at the end of it, they were like, who did this? They didn't even know. I'm a developer advocate. I don't write code for the product anymore. I write code for demos and stuff and things like this. But everyone from the docs team was like, well, that was Angel. Why is he patching our stuff, right? And it's just because I knew what I wanted this thing to say, the correct thing to say, and I did it. So, right, just don't point things out and not have a solution. I think that's counterproductive in some cases. And it's a great way for you to level up too, right? As mentees, right, we definitely have to embrace learning, right? But we also have to be respectful of our mentors' time and resources, right? So we're here, as mentors, we're here to guide mentees, but you have to put the work in, right? You have to do the research for your problem. Sometimes the mentees, we get nervous because we don't understand something, and we can take like 2 days. I've had this happen so many times where I give someone a task, and they come back after a week, and it's not done. Well, what happened? Well, I'm not sure of what's going on. I don't understand this, and instead of them bothering me for 15 minutes, they let it go for a week. So at the end of the day, foster an environment, again, for mentorship. But, you can set some guidelines. I always tell my folks, look at something for about, 15 to 20 minutes. If you can't figure it out, then come hunt someone down and let's figure it out together. But basically, you have to find a good balance there. Otherwise, you'll get a let me Google that for you from me if you just come at me like 2 minutes into something. Because I always ask, how long did you spend on this? This is another kind of a soft skill, but sit back and hear people out. I'm guilty of this sometimes. I already know the answer and I want to jump in, but I want people to, you have to also let people kind of figure things out for themselves. So you have to sit back and let people have these organic conversations. Let them express their thoughts, and then you can express yours. But definitely be patient, right? We all need to learn how to communicate. This is a continuing thing, right? Like, I think I'm a pretty good communicator, but communication is vital, right? We have to invest in learning how to communicate. It definitely increases confidence in yourself and others. And you can also learn how to deliver feedback, right? If you're a good communicator. And one of the things I will advise, and again, I'm still guilty of this too, but try not to elicit tone or emotion from like Slacks or emails or any kind of written text, even commit statements. I can't tell you how many times I see folks get really angry with each other, like, they're not talking to each other, they're just talking to other people about what email was sent out. And at the end of the day, my advice is, if you're feeling that way, have a conversation with them on the phone or go have a coffee together and talk about it. I mean, it doesn't have to be confrontational, right? And I promise you, you'll figure out like, oh, that's not even what they intended, right? Once you have that conversation with folks. So in summary, a lot of times tech problems are not tech problems, right? They're in most cases, the problems stem from people, right? And those people, again, form cultures. So today I hope I've inspired you to all sudo up and take ownership and move, and you can go out in the world, right, into your teams and your organizations and create better cultures that will foster really cool innovations. So at this time I'm done, but we can have some questions. Oh, awesome. What was the question? I'll just walk here. What strategies do you use to help convince team members that your suggestions are not just shiny objects? Ooh, that's a good one. What strategy? So, I think sitting down with them and creating MVPs, right? It doesn't have to be like a full-on product. Just go ahead and if you're talking about technology, sit down, I think, as a team, and maybe what I usually do is I task a few developers who are actually going to be working on the project to do a little research. So I factor in, like, I would say, about a week's time of R&D, And I tell them, hey, take the week, go do what you got to do, and come back, with your findings and share with the team on our weekly stand-up. And, generally that helps. That helps a lot, and that just starts a conversation, and then the rest of the team, who, like maybe the operations folks, can be like, all right, well, we need to stand up X, Y, Z, and all this stuff starts to come on and bubble up, right? All these unknowns start to come up through that conversation, and they get identified, and then we can go another, rounds of plugging in these suggestions with this MVP, so it's an iterative process, but for the most part, just task a few of your developers or folks to start using the technology. And again, within the context of that project to make sure that it fits your needs. Does that answer the question? I hope so. If not, hit me up and we can talk about it. What was the next one? I'm sorry. What logging metrics gathering tools did you use to diagnose your MongoDB thrashing? Yeah. Well, anybody ever hear of Nagios? That's what we were using. And if you ever use Nagios, you'd never want to use it again. There's a lot more powerful tools, I think. Not powerful, but I think there's more modern tools now that are so much easier to use. They just, small little agents that sit on the server. I think at Circle we're using a combination of things, like Datadog, right? Anybody hear of Datadog? They're pretty popular these days. But there's a slew of them now, especially with the change in the cloud. Everybody kind of shifting to the cloud. You can definitely find solutions. I mean, even the cloud providers themselves have some pretty decent tools. You have to pay, of course, but you can leverage those things, and we can talk more about that if you have any other questions. Yes, sir? Yes, sir.
A big part of my daily job is to find solutions, find vetting knowledge, solutions, ideas. But I'm fully agree with you. It takes time, right? Go through them thoroughly in details. But sometimes management team has this mindset of getting things done, making progress. Sometimes they may be misinterpreting the word of being agile, right? Making progress is like some tangible, some
right.
Progress I can see, right?
Yes, sir.
That's a misuse. But making good decision takes time. You cannot expect, okay, within the following 3 weeks, what can you show me? Can't you show anything? Can't show you anything because I'm still in the process of getting all the idea. It takes time.
Right.
How do you reconcile those two different might be misinterpretation?
No, yeah. So, everyone's situation is different, but I've encountered what you're. So the question is, I guess if I can paraphrase. How do you reconcile between management who's super, puts a lot of pressure on you to deliver, and the reality is the development teams need time to vet software? Honestly, I guess my answer would be I would let them experience a failure, and I would control that failure. I hate to say it, but control the failure so that they understand we need time, right? So it's kind of a shady way of doing business, but it depends on who the stakeholder is that's giving you the pressure, right? If it's someone who's not even involved in technology, they just sign the checks, then yeah, we just arrange a little bit of a failure. And I'm not saying a production failure, but maybe in the staging sense, right? So they can see. So they'll understand if something goes down, they'll understand that, right? If they can't do their work, they're gonna say, why did this happen? They'll be angry, but why did this happen? And then you can say, well, look, we need more time to vet this, right? That's my technique, but I would suggest that when you have a failure, because that's what they understand, right? Whoa, this is this could cause critical, right, problems down the road. So. Sure, right, and right, testing, even with Circle CI, right? That's what we do, is continuous integration, continuous delivery. Am I over? Or am I good? Okay, sorry. So one of the things, testing is only as good as your basically your intel or the knowledge you have about, right, how your system works. So generally when a system is not is functioning and then something happens, maybe you introduce a new library, but it has some functionality that you really didn't test, right, and it starts crashing on you. Now you know, oh, I got to write a new unit test for this specific functionality, right? Generally, people kind of go by experience, but you really don't know what you don't know until something breaks. And then you can mitigate that with a test, right? Or at least make sure that once you know about it, you can test it, and then you move on from life, right, from there. Any other questions? Oh, come on, I know there's more than this. It's this guy. He's got one, I see. Come on. You. Yes, sir. That's you. Say again, sir, sorry. Okay, so the question is, I guess this would apply to anyone really, right? The question is, I guess what my recommendations are for folks who are to I guess level up as individuals and then maybe into leadership. I think it all starts with like I said, an environment, right? That so let me take a step back. As individuals, I believe that if you're working in an environment that is, that you can learn in, right, that fosters learning or embraces learning, then that's a good sign, right? So when I go personally, I would advise students to go and ask about what kind of training do you provide, right? Because at the end of the day, we all start from something. We don't magically know everything. It comes with experience. So hands-on, right, on-the-job training is one way for students to kind of just ask those questions. Like, I need some training. They need to understand that they're going to continually be learning. I work with a lot of college kids in Philadelphia, and usually at hackathons, and it's a great way for me to mentor them as well. It's a nice way for me to also identify some talent and then potentially bring them over to my teams and my companies. But for the most part, yeah, my suggestion would be, to students is to put an emphasis on the company's training programs and how they actually educate and what kind of culture do they have as far as like learning. Do they do pair programming, for instance? In some organizations it's required, and others, they don't even know what that is, right? So it's all about making choices based on what you're comfortable with, I would say. But definitely, the cultures right now is becoming really, really important. We spend a lot of time with these people at work, and more so than our families, right? And you should be able to identify early on where companies have either toxic cultures or cultures where you can actually, grow in. So my advice would be like, check out the training programs. Salary's good and all, but at the end of the day, I think that will increase with your experience. And the only way you're going to get experience is if you're in an environment where you can learn and grow. Does that make sense? All right.